Hey everyone, how's it going? Forrest here, again with another installment of my complete analysis of all of Bach's chorale harmonizations. Today we're looking at Auf mein Herz, des Herren Tag, which translates to Arise my heart, the Lord's day. This is a really interesting chorale. We're going to hop right into the analysis, but it has its own little quirks and harmonic intricacies that make it really interesting. So 2 sharps in the key signature, we start on D major, we end on D major. I reckon we're in the key of D major. Our first cadence, however, is a half cadence in the key of D major, so no modulation, but we don't cadence on the tonic. We start off with, like I said, a D major chord, which is our tonic triad. We then have D, A, E, and G. A little bit of a accented dominant here happening over a pedal, but still we have D, A, D, and F sharp, which I think is what the implied chord is happening here, even though there's a little bit of harmonic intrigue happening here with the pedal. But then we have A, D, and B. I think this D is an accented non-chord tone, or sorry, this is not an A, this is G sharp, A, D, and B. I think this A is also a non-chord tone. It's G sharp, E, and B, which is E major, or sorry, this isn't a G sharp, this is G natural, G, E, and B. I was looking ahead here to this G sharp. Now this is E minor over G, which is 2/6, and we would expect that to go to some type of 5 chord, which it does. A, G, E, and C sharp, which is 5/7, A7 root position. This F sharp is a non-chord tone, this G and this A, those are both chord tones, so we don't need to mark them. And then we get a deceptive progression. We have B, F sharp, and D. That's B minor in root position. That's our 6th chord. This B is a chord tone, so we don't need to mark it. We then have E, A, F sharp, and D. I reckon this A is a non-chord tone. I reckon this F sharp is a non-chord tone. And what we're really looking at is E, G sharp, E, and D. We have a 5thless 5/7 chord in terms of A. So this E is the dominant of our dominant, 5/7 of 5, because E is the dominant of A. And then we cadence on A major, A, E, and C sharp. Notice how this half cadence doesn't have the 5th of the chord in the melody. That's something I often talk about in my videos, how Bach will often have half cadences that have the 5th of the chord in the melody, but not always. Sometimes we see the 3rd, sometimes we see the root, but the vast majority of half cadences have the 5th of the chord in the melody. Okay, looking ahead, we have a very interesting phrase. If you're looking and seeing this B flat, this G sharp here, it's spelling an interesting ending for this section, but it's still a perfect authentic cadence in the key of D major, so no modulation just yet. We have G, B, E, and B. That is, you might think that that's a 2/6 chord. However, I think this B is an accented non-chord tone. It's really this C sharp that's our chord tone here. It's C sharp, E, G, and B, which would be C sharp minor 7 flat 5 over G, which would be 7, 4, 3. And the only reason why I say that is because our tonic triad, D major, is on the other end of it. We would expect a dominant chord to precede our tonic chord rather than a 2 chord, which doesn't have as strong a connection to the tonic as a progression moving in the direction of the tonic. Away from the tonic, 1 goes to 2 all the time, but 2 going to 1, especially in the middle of a progression, is not very normal. And this is more consistent with the analyses that I've done in the past. 7 going to 1, F sharp, A, D, and D, which is our tonic triad in first inversion. We then have C sharp, A, E, and A. That's A major over C sharp, which is 5/6, passing 7th in the melody before we get D, A, D, and F sharp. We would be tempted to call that a tonic triad, but this C natural here is telling a different story. This C natural implies that this D major is functioning as a secondary dominant. More specifically, it's functioning as the dominant of 4, 5 of 4, because D is also the 5th scale degree in the key of G. And sure enough, on the next beat, we do get a G major triad, B, G, D, and G, which is 4 in first inversion. Now this B flat here is very interesting. It's a chromatic passing tone, and it just so happens to turn this G major chord into a G minor chord, so we'll go ahead and change that to 4/6. I feel like that's significant enough to analyze, especially because this isn't something that we see in a lot of Bach's music, at least in the chorales that I've been analyzing. And then we have A, D, and F sharp. Now we could analyze this as 1 6-4, because this would be a D major chord over A, but I reckon these two A's are accented non-chord tones. This is something that we see in the chorale sometimes, where some voices double and they split in contrary motion, actually highlighting what I look at as the chord tones in this case. You could say this is 1-6-4 going to another chord. I reckon these A's are just accented non-chord tones. What I think is actually happening here is G sharp, B, D, and F sharp, which is G sharp minor 7 flat 5, which would be the leading tone chord, or the half diminished leading tone chord, 7-7 of 5, which is A major. G sharp is the leading tone to A, and A is our 5, therefore 7-7 of 5. And we've already had some secondary dominance of 5-2, which might be, maybe it's just coincidental, maybe it's hinting at the fact that we're tonicizing A as something that Bach's feeling like doing in this case. Regardless, we go to A, B, D, and E. This D is a 4-3 suspension, and this B is a 9-8 suspension, if you want to look at it that way, but it's still implying a 5 chord. This G is a little micro 7th that happens right before our cadential chord, D, F sharp, A, and D, which is our tonic triad, D major. So looking ahead, we have a perfect authentic cadence in the key of B minor, and I think we modulate, if not straight away, I think it's a zone. I'm going to go ahead and call this D a common chord, because 3 often goes to 4, and 4 is kind of the trajectory of where 3 is going. 3 often goes to 4 or 6, but I find that 3 goes to 4. It's been going to 4 commonly in the chorales that we've been looking at. So we just have a chromatically ascending bass line here. We start from this D major chord, we then go to D sharp, B, B, and F sharp, which is B major, not B minor, over D sharp, which would imply 5-6 of 4, because B also happens to be the dominant of 4. We've just learned that our major version of our tonic triad is sometimes the dominant of 4, as we learned here, but in minor keys it's a little bit more obvious because you're turning the minor triad into a major triad, whereas in major keys there's nothing telling you that it's the secondary dominant unless you add something like a natural 7th, which would be implying that the chord is moving us towards a G via this natural 7th, because that's a tone that's diatonic to the key of the subdominant, and it is chromatic to the key that you're currently in. Alright, looking ahead, we have E, B, F sharp, and G sharp. This F sharp is a 9-8 suspension over the bass, but this E major triad is our major 4 chord. It's just harmonization of melodic minor, because we have the F sharp, the G sharp, the A sharp, and the B all here in the melody, which looks like B major, but it's actually B minor. We then have E, C sharp, F sharp, and A sharp. Now this D right here is kind of interesting because this E kind of looks like either like a 4-5 suspension, or maybe some type of like 2-3 suspension under the alto. But when we look at this D natural contextualized with the rest of the notes, the chord we get is actually D augmented with the 7th. There's a minor 7th there, D to C sharp, which is interesting. Or sorry, it's not a minor 7th. Yeah, D to C sharp would be a major 7th. So this would be like an augmented major 7 chord, or major 7 sharp 5 would be what I would call it. So that's one way you can call it if you see this D as the chord tone. I'm going to look at this E as the chord tone and say that this is F sharp 7 over E, which would be 5-4-2. And I'm just going to say this D is the resolution of this E, which is our chordal 7th, even though it happens in kind of an unexpected way, and what am I trying to say? The unlikely way. Typically D is what we would resolve to on a strong beat, like this chord if there was D in the bass, but in this case we're not, so I think both these analyses are accurate. We then have G, B, F sharp, and B. We could, or sorry, yeah, G, B, F sharp, and B. We could make the argument that this is a G major 7 chord, which would be 6-7, but I think this is actually a 2 chord, G, B, E, and C sharp, which would be C sharp minor 7 flat 5 over G. Another 2-4-3 chord like or another C sharp minor 7 flat 5 chord in second inversion. The only reason why I think it's this chord and not the 6-7 chord, that's just continuing the adjacent harmony is because we're preparing for a cadence, and this is a predominant chord, and we'd be expecting dominant chords right before our final cadential chord, especially in an authentic cadence. And we've seen C sharp minor 7 flat 5 in second inversion before, so seeing this chord again is interesting, especially now that it's being contextualized in the key of B minor rather than in D major. We then have F sharp, B, F sharp, and D, which is B minor second inversion, which is 1 6 4. We would likely see this chord in a cadential situation. We have a neighbor tone in the bass before we get F sharp, A sharp, F sharp, and C sharp with a late 7th here. It's a non-chord tone 7th where we leap up to it, this diminished 5th, which is interesting. But still, F sharp major is our 5 chord. Sometimes we use a little bracket like this to signify or to indicate the fact that 1 6 4 and 5 are often paired together in a cadential context. And then we get B minor, B, D, F sharp, and B, our tonic triad. Okay, looking ahead, we have a perfect authentic cadence in the key of D major, and I think we modulate straight away. This B minor chord is now our 6 in the key of D major. We then have E, E, G sharp, E, E, G, and C sharp. That's C sharp diminished in first inversion, so 7 6. 6 often goes to 7. And then we get D, F sharp, A, and D, which is our tonic triad D major, before we get D, E, A, and E. I reckon this D is a lower suspension. Maybe it's like a 9-10 suspension or 4-5 suspension. Wait, no. D under a 5-6 suspension or something. Or, yeah, it would be either a 9-10 or a 5-6 suspension under one of the other voices, but still C sharp, E, A, and E is more likely. That'd be a 5-6 chord, A major over C sharp. We then get D, D, A, and F sharp, which is our tonic triad again. Have we seen this progression before? Am I crazy? Yeah, I'm crazy. I thought we've seen this progression before. Kind of sort of what's going on right here, but the D major chord gets recontextualized. No, I'm crazy. I was just confusing this from my notes. But then we have G, D, B, and E. That's E minor 7 over G. That is our 2-6-5 chord. Bach loves 2-6-5 chords. We then get A, C sharp, A, and E. That's our 5 chord. That's what we would expect after a 2-6-5 chord. Passing 7th of the alto before we get D, A, F sharp, and D, which is our tonic triad D major to close out today's chorale. Pretty straightforward chorale today. Some interesting chords going on here, especially in B minor. A little unsure about where the modulation happens. It sounds like it's happening here, somewhere in these 3 beats for me. I think if I were to hedge my bets, it happens before the G sharp, so we could say that this secondary dominant is our modulation chord, but ultimately what matters is that you can identify the fact that there's a key change that's happening in transition between the end of the first section and the beginning of the second section. But other than that, pretty much everything's functionally harmonic, and it was straightforward to analyze. If you're interested in following me along on my journey to analyze all of Bach's chorale harmonizations, feel free to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification icon. I upload once a day, so you'll be notified of when I upload. If you want your daily dose of Bach or your daily fix of analysis or both, you're definitely in the right place, and I'd love to have you along on the journey. But that being said, thank you so much for watching the video. Thank you so much for subscribing to the channel. I hope you subscribe to the channel. Thank you so much for supporting the channel by watching this video. I look forward to tomorrow's analysis, and I hope you take care.